Thank you. Springfield Bishop Talbert Swan II, who's senior pastor of Spring of Hope Church of God in Christ and president of the Greater Springfield NAACP, has been inducted into the Martin Luther King Jr. Board of Preachers at Morehouse College. The historic induction ceremony held in Atlanta, Georgia, honors distinguished clergy and lay leaders who reflect the prophetic witness, moral courage, and unwavering commitment to justice, which the college promotes. Speaking at today's induction was Episcopal Bishop Marianne Edgar Budd of Washington, D.C., who also delivered the homily at the interfaith prayer service following President Trump's second inauguration. Bishop Swan issuing a statement saying it's a profound honor to be inducted, saying Dr. King's life and message shaped his ministry and activism.